You're listening to a Frequency Podcast Network production.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said, empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
There's people that are dying.
Wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is work.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hello and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks how would we react to the same events if they'd transpired today. I'm your co-host, Sadaf Hassan.
And I'm Sarah Sahagian. This week, we'll be discussing the rise and fall of America's most iconic domestic dynamo. Obviously, we're referring to none other than Martha Stewart. So, Sadaf, when did you first become aware of Martha Stewart? Do you love Martha or do you love to hate her?
This is a very good question. I think I actually probably first found out about her when I was a kid because my mom loved her towels. They are very sweet, soft towels, I still remember. So that was kind of the way that I knew her. And then I would see her pop up on TV all the time on Lifetime shows in her sweater sets and her pastels. That's how I knew her. But I think the moment I really took notice of her was with her big scandal and all the talk of how corrupt and scheming and cruel she was. Even then, though, I will say I didn't know if I could believe it because I also didn't completely understand what the scandal was. But I remember that she came off to me like a Disney villain. That's kind of how I saw her for a long time. And since then, I've never really kind of known how to process her. She just seems like a very interesting woman and a very complicated figure. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I do think she's a very interesting person and a very complicated person. I always had sort of a peripheral awareness of her growing up. I remember them spoofing her on this show called Royal Canadian Air Farce that I liked as a child. It's this
that show,
this Canadian sketch show. There was one skit where I believe Martha was telling you how to make your own sun, like the sun in the sky. It was a satire, although maybe kind of a silly, not super incisive one. No offense to the show, of how she was just this extreme DIY person, right? Martha could do anything herself from scratch, probably at 4 a.m. And that was her identity. She was teaching us how to do these things. And if we couldn't do them for ourselves, then she would just sell us the things her company made. And so I think Martha was kind of inescapable if you grew up in North America. She's one of those people that you had a cultural awareness of. But in researching this episode, I realized that her origin story is different from what I was expecting. So born Martha Kostira in 1941, she was raised in Nutley, New Jersey, where she was the second of 6 siblings and the eldest daughter. The Kostiras were a Polish-American family. Her father, a teacher turned pharmaceutical salesman, recognized her potential at a very young age. As a child, he told Martha, "You can do anything you set your mind to because you're a hard worker." She came from a middle-class background, but she was definitely not the WASP princess I think a lot of people assume she always was.
Yeah.
Martha began working as a model at age 13, walking runways, posing for print ads, and even appearing in TV commercials. She'd go on to attend the prestigious Barnard College in Manhattan, graduating in 1962. During her time at Barnard, she met Yale law student Andy Stewart, whom she married in 1961. The couple share one child, a daughter named Alexis. In her 20s, Martha worked as a stockbroker for Monash, Williams & Seidel, a firm in Manhattan, but she quit the gig in 1972 when the family moved to Westport, Connecticut. Martha spent her time in Connecticut restoring the 19th century farmhouse her family purchased and honing her gourmet cooking skills using Julia Child's cookbooks. Eventually, Martha decided to monetize her stellar homekeeping skills when in 1973 she started her own catering company. By 1977, her husband Andrew was working as the president of renowned publisher Harry and Abrams, Inc. He hired his wife to cater a release party for a blockbuster book called The Secret Book of Gnomes. At the party, Martha met Alan Merkin, head of Crown Publishing. Merkin was so impressed with Martha's food that he offered her a book deal. Martha's first book, Entertaining, was ghostwritten by Elizabeth Hawes and released in 1982. While Martha has often turned to ghostwriters throughout her career, this is actually standard practice in the celebrity cookbook community. Plus, it's unlikely anyone could write as many books as Martha, she's published 97 of them, without a little help. Throughout the 1980s, Martha released several more books, including Weddings, Martha Stewart's Christmas, and Martha's Pies and Tarts. Now in her 40s, she became a bona fide celebrity with regular guest appearances on shows like Oprah and Larry King. So, Sadaf, what do you think of Martha's origin story? How self-made do we actually consider her? After all, she used her husband's connections to get catering gigs, but it was her food that got her noticed.
I think to be well established, just in the food world, and for me to notice you, not that I mean anything in the food world, but you've got to be legitimately good. Your cooking's got to be good. You've got to know what you're doing, and connections can really only get you so far. And in my opinion, credibility, the ultimate credibility is based on skill. And I think she definitely had it. I mean, she built this massive empire. But what's really cool about this is I didn't know that she worked so hard so early on. I mean, she started her own company after being a stockbroker and turning to the domestic world, which I think is so fascinating. It all just makes her even more compelling to me, actually. And for an origin story, it's not a Disney villain origin story necessarily. It just makes her sound very inspirational, I think.
And she became a stockbroker at a time when almost no women worked in that industry.
Yes.
My mom became a bond trader in 1979, so that's a
cool.
a similar job. And she was one of the first women in North America to do it. And that was years after Martha became a stockbroker. So I think that one thing that always comes through about Martha is that she's a pioneer. Like, she's always on the forefront of any trend. She was one of the early women working in finance. Then she started sort of this new craze for homemaking, but kind of almost a professionalized version of homemaking. Viewing homemaking as an art became a status symbol. And trying to give your family the most beautiful home and the most beautiful meals and researching recipes and all these things was something that she was really on the forefront of popularizing that, which, was both good and bad because, yes, Americans started living in some ways more beautiful lives, but there was a lot of pressure on women to create that environment for their families, and it's a ton of work.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess kind of her branding was, well, I'll make it easy. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. But one thing that I do want to add is that she was so smart. She came in that field, too, before it was something that people built entire lifestyle brands on. She was one of the first. She might even be the first. So she went from this kind of traditionally masculine industry to a very traditionally feminine industry. But she was kind of at the top of both, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah. People often refer to her as the original influencer.
Yeah.
And I think that that's completely accurate. But I also think if she hadn't done it, someone else would have. So I don't fault her too much for creating this environment where there was so much pressure on women to establish these gorgeous, stunning homes, because capitalism was always going to go in that direction.
Amen.
That was inevitable.
Amen.
In 1990, Martha and her husband officially divorced, and that same year, she saw her career rise higher than approved focaccia dough, thanks to the launch of Martha Stewart Living magazine. Naturally, Martha served as its editor-in-chief. In 1993, Martha launched a weekly half-hour show based on her magazine called The Martha Stewart Living TV Show. The show turned the successful TV personality into an icon, and by 1999, the hour-long series aired every single weekday. She even coined her own catchphrase, and that's a good thing.
I actually don't love that catchphrase.
No.
Not my favorite Martha moment.
I think it's pretty underwhelming.
I don't love it. But that's okay, Martha.
Living, as Martha refers to her former show, taught Americans how to lead a more beautiful life. She instructed her TV viewers on subjects like appropriate place settings for entertaining, baking the perfect chocolate chip cookies, and taught them to make lots and lots of crafts. Here's a clip from the 1995 Living Christmas special.
To make this very charming bay leaf wreath, press the bay leaves, if they're fresh, between the pages of a book. And then you can paint them with a paintbrush or dip them into the gold paint. Wrap the wreath form with some paper tape. It gives a wider base to glue the leaves.
Arousing. That sounds like ASMR for like the 90s.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if she had come to fame today, maybe she would have incorporated more ASMR into her career.
She would have been a big TikTok hit, I think.
Oh, she's now on TikTok and she's already exploding.
Well, there you go.
And that is something my mother has always said about her, that she finds Martha's voice very soothing. She just loves the sound of her voice.
Yeah.
Martha wasn't just a star. She became a merchandising mogul. Her Kmart line meant that the average American's house could look and feel a little bit like Martha's. Maybe you couldn't afford her sprawling country estate, but you could have the same brand of hand towels hanging in your bathroom. Since then, many other celebrities, from Nate Berkus to Chrissy Teigen, have followed in Martha's footsteps, launching lifestyle lines at big box chains.
Love Nate Berkus, I do just want to say.
Oh, Nate is fantastic. Also, like, one of the most attractive humans I think I've ever seen in my life.
Adorable, yes.
Just so attractive. And his story, we could do a whole episode on how he survived the tsunami. Tragic.
And it would be a happy episode in the end.
In the end, yes. Barbara Lippert's 1995 profile of Martha for New York Magazine described her like this, quote, "More than a franchise, more than a lifestyle, more than an attitude, she's a living trademark." Wow. And I think that's accurate because there are just so many Martha products in the world.
I actually do too. It sounds very funny, but if you think about it, not false. Yeah.
While Martha certainly benefited from her connections, beauty, and her white privilege, she's also an undeniably hard worker.
Yeah.
In 2009, she told ABC News that she sleeps only a few hours a night and rises before her chickens do so she can get an early start to her mornings. Martha has also stated that she never gets sick because, quote, "that would be a waste of time."
Go, Martha. I also just picture she lives a very sterile lifestyle, so she couldn't get sick. How could she?
Oh, Martha's definitely a germaphobe. I have no proof of this, but she was the first person to buy the silver germ spray. You know, the silver germ spray that the rich moms buy? She was a pioneer there, I'm sure.
I can see it. I fully believe this. And maybe like the toilet spray after you take like a number 2, just a little drop. That's Martha.
Oh, yeah. And in the late 90s, all that hard work she's put in over the years was about to pay off, and in a big way. In September 1997, Stewart secured funding to purchase the various television, print, and merchandising projects already associated with her name. Martha became CEO of a newly consolidated company called Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia. In 1999, Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia went public. Naturally, Martha served cupcakes and muffins to traders on the New York Stock Exchange during the IPO.
Adorable.
By the end of the day's trading, she was a billionaire, making her one of the richest women in America. Martha would later tell Bloomberg that she remembered driving home that night along Madison Avenue and telling the driver, quote, "I could buy anything here."
Martha is the most relatable. That's what I'm learning.
So is it tacky or empowering that Martha was so candid about her wealth? No, I think I know your answer, and I definitely know mine. I don't think it's tacky because we live in a world where there is a wage gap, and even for the most privileged women, and Martha was, quite privileged, it's very hard for them to get to that level of being billionaires. So if you can get there, like, sing it.
Oh my God, hell yeah. I mean, I think, listen, that line is a little tacky, what she said to her driver, and maybe not something she should announce. But I have always been someone who is very much fuck modesty. I'm not a fan. If you're doing well and you work hard and you're talented, oh my God, talk about it. If you're successful and you're a woman, you should especially talk about it, because that does feel a little bit more doable. It feels like a goal that we can all reach when it's at least somebody who's in more of a marginalized demographic. I'm not saying she is one, but again, like we were saying, when she started, she was one of few women to do what she was doing. So listen, talk about it. Absolutely own it. I am all for that.
I feel like as long as she was compensating her driver well, like giving him a good tip and treating all of her employees with respect and paying them, a fair and, hopefully more than living wage, then I'm cool with her liking being rich. Like, listen, we live in a capitalist society where there are many billionaires, probably too many. And most of those billionaires seem to be doing more destructive things and more useless things with their wealth than Martha. So I have a hard time being mad at Martha for enjoying being like an entry-level billionaire. Like, live your best life, Martha.
And it's refreshing. Say it. Don't just say everything is because you worked hard and because you drink water. Like, I want to hear the honesty. This is it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, by teaching her largely female audience how to be the perfect homemakers, Martha ironically became one of America's most powerful women. But Martha's time at the top was short-lived. We'll tell you about her downfall after this break. In December of 2001, Martha allegedly received a tip from an old stockbroker friend that she should sell off her 4,000 shares of ImClone because the FDA was about to announce their decision not to review the company's application for a cancer drug called Erbitux. This news obviously shook the confidence of investors, resulting in a drop of 18% for ImClone on December 31st, 2001. Martha sold her stock the day before the FDA released its decision, avoiding there are various reports about the loss she avoided, but most reports say she avoided a loss of about $45,000. Some go up to $50,000. Either way, this woman was a billionaire, so for her, that's pretty negligible.
Drop in the bucket.
Yeah. However, many people, including the prosecutors who investigated her, thought the timing was suspicious. The sale led to an investigation of Stewart's dealings with ImClone by the Securities and Exchange Commission, who believed Martha had been tipped off about the upcoming announcement. In January 2002, Martha's stockbroker, Peter Bekanovich, told the SEC's attorneys that he and his client did not commit insider trading. Rather, his client had agreed on December 20th, 2001 to sell ImClone if it fell to $60. Martha has never abandoned the position that she had agreed to sell the stock when it hit $60. But her innocence came into serious question on October 2nd, 2002, when former Merrill Lynch assistant Douglas Fano pled guilty to taking a payoff in exchange for keeping quiet about the Stewart stock trade. So, insider trading is bad. It is. But do we actually care about this? Like, is it a crime that changes the way we feel about a person? And many people have said insider trading is a victimless crime. You are not stealing from anyone else. You're only stealing from the concept of fairness, really.
Yeah, it's not hurting anybody. It's not a violent crime. I don't care all that much. I'm sorry. I don't know that I should. I don't think that it's crazy that this is something she did. Again, she didn't hurt anybody. Insider trading is not great, as you said, but it doesn't make me write off a person and decide that they're evil. What about you, Sarah?
So I agree with everything you just said. It's also not completely clear whether she did intentionally commit insider trading.
Right.
Like, that's a thing where I go both ways on this. It's possible that because she just loves money so much, and she used to be a stockbroker, so this is an industry she understands. It's possible that she was that concerned about saving $45,000 and did this. It's also possible that because this woman is incredibly busy, she didn't really pay attention, didn't really do this, and just had already agreed, like, okay, here are my stocks, sell this one at this number, this one at that number. Like, I could go either way about this. I don't know if she actually did commit insider trading or not. I'm not sure.
I would agree. Yeah. It's foggy. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the world decided that she did it. So that's the key thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the media and a lot of the public, the not pro-Martha public. I have a good friend who identifies as part of the pro-Martha community. The pro-Martha community did not believe she deserved to be indicted.
Of course not.
So on June 4th, 2003, Stewart was indicted on 9 federal counts. That same day, Stewart resigned as chairwoman and CEO of Martha Stewart Omnimedia, the company she built and gave her name. However, Martha remained chief creative officer. She also remained a member of the company's board. The much-publicized trial began on January 27th, 2004. The prosecution claimed Stewart sold ImClone based on a secret tip, which constitutes insider trading. They also alleged that she later lied to cover up this fact during the investigation, which is also illegal. Some of the most damning testimony at trial came from Martha's assistant, Anne Armstrong, who testified that her boss had altered the log of a potentially incriminating message Bekanovich left on the day she sold ImClone. But But Armstrong also said that Martha later ordered the message changed back. Martha also never asked her assistant to lie for her. That is something that her assistant maintained. On March 5th, 2004, Martha's 6-week trial concluded. She was convicted of felony charges of conspiracy, obstruction of an agency proceeding, and making false statements to federal investigators. Infuriatingly, the Department of Justice charges against Stewart for criminal securities fraud had actually been thrown out the month before. Therefore, prosecutors never proved she was guilty of insider trading, the alleged crime that started the whole debacle. Rather, Martha went to prison because she was convicted of thwarting an investigation into the same trade the Department of Justice decided didn't warrant charges. Whether you love Martha or hate her, the fact that she went to prison for such offenses feels farcical.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. The whole thing is absurd. And I do think to this day, people like to topple successful women. And these people will look for any gaps or holes that they can poke at and say, this is inexcusable about this person. They don't deserve to have what they have, much less the platform that they have. And they're just dying, salivating to take them to task. I think she was and is always going to be that person. But at the same time, she is so squeaky clean. Even after going through this, her brand today, which we're going to talk about later, is just perfection. It didn't really impact her. Whereas if this was a person of color, a woman of color who was going through this, I think she would have had to pay a way bigger cost. And she would not have that reputation today. She'd just be banished from the public eye. It's also like insider trading. God, what a white person crime, I gotta say. The whole thing is just there's so many ways to come at it.
Absolutely. If she'd been racialized, I think she would have been punished much more. If she hadn't been conventionally attractive, I think she would have been punished much more. And it's simultaneously true that somebody like Madoff stole from charities, ruined lives. Like, people just think that he stole from super rich people. That's actually not true. He stole from some super rich people. He also stole from nonprofits. He ruined lives, and that's probably received as much, perhaps less, press coverage than Martha did for this $45,000 that she may or may not have gotten through insider trading.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, but also not surprising in any way.
No, not at all. So ahead of her sentencing, Martha wrote a letter to Judge Miriam G. Cedarbaum, the presiding judge, and she was hoping for leniency here. And this is something that often happens. It's not just Martha who did this. People often write letters to the judges presiding over their trials ahead of sentencing. So here's an excerpt. I sold my remaining shares of ImClone not because I had insider information, not because I was secretly tipped, but because I set a price, made a profit, and knew I could always invest if I wanted to. She added, to believe that I sold because Sam was trying to sell is so very, very wrong. To believe that I would sell to avoid a loss of less than $45,000 and thus jeopardize my life, my career, and the well-being of hundreds of others, my cherished colleagues and partners, is very, very wrong. Do we think that she's actually contrite here and that she's telling the truth? Like, what do you think?
It's tough. I think my opinion changes every so often. Right now, I want to say that I actually do think she was tipped off. It's hard not to believe that because the timing is just so suspicious. It makes it very black and white. But again, this is a woman who loves to make money. I don't want to say she didn't realize how much of a crime this would be because, again, she was a stockbroker. So she knew what she was walking into. What I think is that she didn't realize how big of a scandal this was going to become. I don't think she knew that it would hurt anybody. And I don't even really know that it did legitimately, the way that she says in her letter. I think she said what she said to save her reputation and her brand. She kind of had to. I don't think she had a choice. She sort of had to say, I didn't do it in that sense, if we're trying to keep that alive.
So I go either way. Like, I actually don't know because the love of money can motivate you to break the rules. It can also motivate you to follow them to the letter. I have no idea.
I do wonder if it's like a too big to fail situation where, yeah, if you and I made a huge sum of money, I don't think that either of us would jump to insider trading. But Martha Stewart is somebody who, again, she was a billionaire. Yeah. So maybe she felt like nothing could go past her. I mean, at that point, she'd never had a blemish on her career or her reputation. So, you know, I mean, we hear so many stories of people who make that much money and can get away with literally murder. We'll cover that in a later episode. No. So I think, you know, it could be one of those things. She just didn't think that it would affect her.
So Judge Cedarbaum also received a total of 1,500 letters from Martha's admirers asking her to be lenient with America's favorite domestic goddess. Some of these letters came from fellow celebrities, including Rosie O'Donnell and serial rapist Bill Cosby. Yeah, he was a fan of Martha.
Who knew?
Who knew? I was surprised by that one. I was like, well, Rosie loves crafts. Like, Rosie obviously would be like, I love crafts. Martha does crafts. Don't send this woman to jail. But Bill Cosby.
That just goes to show, though, these people, both of them with unbelievably squeaky clean reputations, had some real fucking skeletons in the closet. So maybe it's the ones who are the squeakiest and the cleanest that we should not be trusting ever. Just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Just be suspicious of everyone. Well, they do say serial killers make excellent neighbors.
There you go.
Like that they are honestly the people who are the first to put their garbage out for garbage day, the first to take the can back in. Like they are fastidious. So maybe we're on to something here.
Yeah. I also love that you've been researching that, but moving along.
I don't know if that's factual. I think I learned that from My Favorite Murder, which is a podcast I very much enjoy, but like I don't know if they actually have scientific research to back that up or not. Maybe they do.
It sounds legit.
I agree.
Allegedly.
It checks out. It checks out to me. Judge Cedarbaum read every single letter and ultimately handed Martha the lightest sentence possible: 5 months in prison and 5 months of house arrest. Following the sentencing, Martha gave a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. She did not admit any wrongdoing, but she did use the opportunity to apologize to her employees for how the scandal impacted their lives.
Her supporters had gathered since early morning, holding signs that read, "Free Martha" and "Martha, stay strong." She thanked them and apologized to the 200 employees at her company who lost their jobs.
I want them to know how very, very sorry I am for them and their families.
Of her jail sentence, Martha said, quote, "I'm used to all kinds of hard work, as you know, and I'm not afraid." So Martha just basically like reframed jail as hard work. And she's like, I can do this.
I love that. I actually really love that. I think her entire brand has stayed consistent even during her jail time, which is truly something.
Yeah. I mean, this is a person who is always herself. Like in any situation, she's always Martha. The tabloids gleefully rejoiced in Martha's conviction. The March 22nd cover of Us Weekly featured a cover of beaming Martha cooking in happier times. The accompanying headline read, quote, "Prison Bound, the Fall of Miss Perfect." A New York Post headline reacting to Martha's sentencing in June 2004 read, "5 months for moody Martha." Like, oh, because she's not like super nice and happy all the time.
Seriously.
Martha's ordeal was also turned into a 2005 TV movie starring Sybil Shepherd titled Martha Behind Bars.
I do want to say that's good casting, and that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, it is. I remember watching the movie when it premiered.
Oh.
I was not a huge fan, but it is good casting. I agree. I mean, I really think that Martha's a very complicated figure. And if you're going to cast a white lady actress as Martha and somebody who I think could capture her essence, I think you need more of a Glenn Close or a Meryl. But Sybil does look like her.
She does. And I would hope to see that kind of treatment if we ever get like a feature film. That would be really exciting, I think. And just get all the complications in there.
Greta Gerwig, this is your next project. Do a Martha movie, please.
I love it. I fully support.
In a 2002 article from the New York Times by Alessandra Stanley and Constance L. Hayes, the writers referred to the media circus surrounding Martha's trial as Blondenfreude, which they define as, quote, "the glee felt when a rich, powerful, and fair-haired businesswoman stumbles."
And listen, it's the same thing that I was saying before. People fucking love when a powerful woman gets knocked over and taken down a peg. That is still so present today, and you can see it even just on social media when a woman posts a selfie of herself. I use that example because it's the smallest version of this, but you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, that's what the comments are loaded with. You're not as beautiful as you think you are. And I think it's a version of this that's kind of been filtered down. People just don't like to see when a woman is confident and proud of herself and she's doing well. And I think, again, when you have someone like Martha, who is also white and attractive and successful, and like I was saying before, squeaky clean, there is a need to take her off her perch and be like, actually, you're not that perfect, to kind of teach her a lesson. I don't understand why. I mean, I do. That's the patriarchy at work again. Sorry to bring up that word, but it's just also old school. It's just so ancient. I even remember my parents talking about this way back when it was happening, and I love them, but they did not love Martha Stewart. And I remember them talking about her as if she deserved this because she had, quote, enough money. And so it was just this idea that you've done it, you've reached it. That's good enough. You don't need any more. And maybe that's true in terms of how much money she was making, but I don't think that's what they and a lot of people meant, especially these tabloids. I think it was, you've had enough success. Like, we draw the line here. And of course, we know men never get that kind of treatment.
No, absolutely they don't, no matter how ridiculous they are with their money. I mean, Elon Musk does the most absurd things with his money, but I mean, he so far has been allowed to keep it. And yet the justice system basically enforced a glass ceiling for Martha.
Yeah, exactly. And Elon, by the way, Time Person of 2021. So there you go.
Absolutely. Of 2020. He didn't even give his kid a real name. And he is the Time Person of 2021. Like, his kid has a number as a name. Anyway. As Ann Foster pointed out for Long Reads in 2019, Martha really was the target of gender double standards in this scandal. Her case received a ton of press attention, and yet most male corporate criminals who get skewered in the press are accused of stealing millions more before anyone really cares. Says Foster, Stewart was both investigated more ruthlessly than many of her male counterparts, and she was also publicly shamed in a way men were never subjected to. And I mean, it also comes down to the fact that, like, when Madoff had the movie made about him, he destroyed many, many lives. And also, it was like a high-end HBO movie, not like a movie of the week. So even the art made about him
Wasn't he played by Robert De Niro?
Yeah. So how did Martha's time in prison go in the end? During the 5 months she spent incarcerated, Martha did what Martha does best. She adapted. Here's a clip of Martha speaking with the Daily Mail in 2018.
Was the food good? Was the
food?
Yeah, in prison.
The food
what
was
it
dated, like, I don't remember what year that was, but some of the food was dated like 3 years prior. Expiration. You know, if it was 2001, the food was expired in 1999. I mean, you would not want to eat that food. That's why I made jam out of the crab apples on the trees.
That was so sweet. She made a jam in jail.
Yep. Yeah, Martha will thrive anywhere you send her. Like this,
I believe that.
This woman is a survivor. And she says it about herself. She'll say, I'm a survivor. And she is.
She is. I have to say, I love her so much. And I remember that time. I remember when the reports would come out that she was thriving while she was put away. And people were laughing about it. But when we talk about it now, I think that's kind of amazing. She was so resilient. She doesn't even sound like she had a bad time.
You can't destroy Martha. The patriarchy tried and they failed.
Ha ha, amazing.
In 2013, Martha also reflected on her time in prison during an interview with the Today Show's Matt Lauer. I will not play clips from this interview because Matt Lauer is a sexual predator, and I personally find his voice too triggering.
It is.
Martha insisted to Lauer that there was no real silver lining to the experience. She said, quote, "It's hard to say good comes out of bad," explaining, "I lost a fortune." When Lauer inquired about Martha's history as a polarizing person who many dislike, she replied that might be true because, quote, "Maybe I'm too confident." And I think that's completely accurate. Martha's very self-aware. Do you think people are as threatened by confident women today as they were in the early 2000s? And do you think this was the primary reason why people hated her? Like, do you think that this was the locus of people's hatred?
I do think so. I think it's also why she got labeled moody all the time and sour and bitchy. And listen, just because a woman has a bitch face doesn't mean she's a villain, okay? In her field, as somebody who was considered a domestic goddess, she was expected to smile and kowtow and kind of show submission in some way, but she was never going to be that type of woman. And that is confidence. Something that I've experienced over the years, the more confident I got in my own life, the more I found people telling me, especially men, "Oh, you're intimidating," as if it's a bad thing. And that's a conversation I've had a lot with my female friends that they've experienced when they've felt confidence. And I think it is threatening to some people. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Martha is somebody who has traditionally masculine traits when it comes to her business acumen. That's the confidence, the ball busting. She had her own vision. She liked money. But then at the same time, she was working in a traditionally female industry. So I think if you combine all of that, it's confusing to people, especially when we've been taught to hate and denigrate everything that is considered feminine. You know what I mean? And she was kind of that woman. But when you combine her personality with that persona, it's threatening because it's all of those things wrapped up into one. And so I actually find all of that to be incredibly inspirational. And that makes me feel more confident because she was a tough, hardworking woman. And so what if she's not smiling all the time? She's busy.
Oh, yeah. I think you're absolutely right that she is a bundle of contradictions and things that shouldn't be contradictory, but are in our society. We see them as contradictory, right? She was a businesswoman, but she was also a homemaker. She took both things seriously. And she also showed us how complicated homemaking is, but then demystified it for people and taught other people how to do it. She exposed that there is skill to homemaking, but the idea that there's skill there and that it's difficult and that it requires intelligence and hard work, I think is almost threatening to men who want to dismiss women, especially homemakers, because, you know, they're seen as symbols of traditional femininity. Well, then suddenly homemakers become threatening if they're actually secretly the most competent people in the house, because actually it's really hard to make crafts and to do a place setting and make dinner and get the kids ready for school. And all of those things are logistically very complicated. Like in my life, I struggle a lot more with homemaking than I do with career. And I have just the one kid. I know many women who have more children than I do, probably have more domestic responsibilities than I do. But I find that stuff really difficult. And she, on her show, in many ways, was showing you like, yeah, this is real labor. This is real work. And then she made a ton of money off of that.
Yeah. And not anyone can make jam in jail, you know, but Martha can.
And I get why that's threatening to a lot of these male billionaires who might have been able to make billions, but definitely didn't know how to make jam. Like,
exactly.
Was Madoff making jam in jail? No, Madoff was not making jam in jail. So, after her release, Martha immediately set about rebuilding her struggling empire. Post-prison, she starred on The Martha Stewart Show and The Apprentice Martha Stewart, both of which premiered in 2005. Martha Stewart Omnimedia also started selling craft supplies at Walmart in 2008. In 2016, Martha began our producer Joe's favorite one of her ventures, Martha and Snoop Dogg's Potluck Dinner Party. Yes, she co-hosted the show with Snoop Dogg on VH1. It ran for 2 seasons. When asked about what many saw as the odd pairing by Bloomberg, Martha insisted, "I hit it off with all the rappers. I love rap."
Of course you do, Martha.
Here's a clip from the show. It's from the season 2 premiere, which aired in 2017.
Welcome to Martha and Snoop's Potluck Dinner Party. Snoop and I are back. It's our birthday celebration.
So we lighten up. Candles, that is.
Since we always have the most fun together, we decided to throw Snoop a birthday party.
It ain't nothing but a big kid party. You dig? Martha, I know you love DJ Fred Ray, but as a gift.
Sadaf, did you watch any of Martha's comeback shows? Do you have any thoughts about them?
I did. So first I'll say I did watch a bit of The Apprentice, not all of it, because I'm a huge Bethany Frankel fan from Real Housewives of New York, and she was on the show. And I did really enjoy The Apprentice, even when, dare I say his name, Donald Trump was there. Don't really want to admit that ever again in my life. But I watched a bit of it. Didn't really, you know, Martha is not somebody who I feel like I can connect with in a way where I find her to be entertaining or joyous. I think she speaks to an older demographic in the way that she is persona-wise, but I appreciate her, and I appreciated her more when I watched her show with Snoop, which I actually really found enjoyable, but I have to admit, it is very, very corny, okay? But their relationship together is so delightful and sweet, and I think they both served each other well, because he made her seem a little bit more fun and loose, as much as she can be, and she made him seem like a little bit more down-to-earth, and like he himself can be a little bit of a domestic diva. And actually, I do want to recommend his cookbook, which is called Snoop Dogg From Crook to Cook. It is not a bad cookbook, FYI. But
it time.
She's interesting. She's not somebody whose shows I can necessarily watch, but I appreciated what it did for her brand because I did think, hey, that's fun. They're fun. I'm into it. I'm not mad. Even if it's like just weed joke after weed joke. That's what it is.
Yeah, this is a woman who, I mean, basically achieved the pinnacle of power for women in America.
Yeah.
And then was knocked off her pedestal and is now kind of living her best life. It's kind of like Hillary Clinton's mystery writer phase. Like, it's very similar.
I like that.
But I know Joe has a lot of thoughts about her show with Snoop, and Joe's our producer. So I would like to hand the mic to him to explain his reflections on this series.
Please.
Yeah, I found it trying. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I do agree. I do like the dynamic between Snoop and Martha. I think their relationship is quite sweet. What I don't appreciate is this kind of like through line throughout the whole show where it just seems like every guest is just waiting for the moment where they can say kind of like weirdly sexual things to Martha Stewart. Like that seems to be the general conceit. Yeah. Like I was watching one clip where they were doing one of their quote unquote games, which a big complaint is also that none of these games are actually games. Nobody ever wins anything. But they're playing this game where like they need to dress people up in ugly Christmas sweaters. Paris Hilton's on. Snoop is wearing one of the sweaters. And then the other guy, I don't know his name, but he's just like this big beefcake. And instead of putting on the sweater, he just takes off his shirt so that Martha needs to like adorn his bare chest with Christmas ornaments. I don't know. You know, maybe I'm probably not the target demographic.
No, it is though. I'm actually kind of wondering at this point.
That's what I was kind of, you know what it feels like to me, to put a fine point on it, and I'll go back to my silent producer role after this. To me, the show feels like Eric Andre directed an episode of Ellen.
Oh,
like
wow.
That's what the show feels like to me.
I think that's very spot
like a
on.
fever dream a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I do agree. She's very much a punchline in her own show.
Which I guess like at this point in her career, she kind of needed to be because she'd experienced so much vitriol. The public clearly loved to hate her. And I guess like lean into that and make yourself some money, Martha. Like, I mean, she's adaptable.
I mean, this is one of those things too, right? I mean, women in business, you always have to be a little bit quote unquote in on the joke or you're seen as like a humorless bitch.
Yeah.
And so her kind of leaning into it in this way and being like, okay, listen, I know my brand and I know the way you all see me. So fine, I'll be the punchline. This is going to be corny and cringy, but it lightens her image. It does, even though none of us actually really enjoy it in that way. But
I will say, get a absolutely fire recipe for mulled wine out of it. So there is
I love mulled
there
wine.
We go.
Okay, send me the clip, Joe. I haven't seen that clip.
Martha would have a good mulled wine recipe.
This is why Martha is a billionaire and has a beautiful home. And my home it has character, but it's not beautiful. And I'm not a billionaire. So.
That's not true. Well, you're not a billionaire. I mean, the other part is not true. Listen, it's true. It's true. She taught me how to make pie crust that everybody loves. I've never gotten a bad comment on my pie crust. So listen, we all have borrowed from her book, right? In some sense. It might not be this show, but she's defined a lot of things. I still have never felt a softer towel than Martha Stewart towels. It's just a fact.
She makes quality products. Like Martha does everything well, I would say. Everything she does, she seems to do to the best of her abilities. That's my take on Martha.
With a charming bitch face. And we love that because that's realistic.
We love it. Exactly. Women don't need to smile. No one owes you a smile.
Our faces are tired. We're tired.
Martha's very tired. She sleeps 3 hours a night. Like, she does not have the energy to smile. She needs to preserve her energy to make her Christmas wreaths. Like, that's what she needs to do.
Yeah. Well, listen, as a workaholic, I actually love that about her, that she doesn't sleep. Again, an inspiration.
So, admittedly, there were several years when Martha Stewart Omnimedia failed to turn a profit. It took some effort. It wasn't instantaneous. But today, the company is profitable once again. Martha used to be a billionaire, but today she's also quite wealthy. The 2021 wealth of Martha Stewart is estimated at $400 million. That's a lot of money.
Not bad.
No, I take
Not
it.
too bad.
I take it.
Yeah.
She also was reinstated as a member of the board for Martha Stewart Omnimedia in 2011, which makes me happy. It's the same board she had resigned from in disgrace 7 years before. That's a great redemption arc.
Yeah.
It is now time for Hindsight is 2022, the segment where Sadaf and I discuss what we might have done differently if we were the subjects of today's story.
I shouldn't have done that.
What would I have done differently? I mean, you know what? I think the way that she's handled this as far as press goes was pretty flawless because, again, I said this earlier. I think this is just the fact of the matter. If you want to protect your own brand when you are at the level that she was, you kind of have to say, I didn't know. I mean, she could have come clean, but I think the way that people were already so primed to tear her down, it would have been such a bloodbath, even more so if she was honest. And that's saying, again, if she actually did know, and maybe she didn't, it's unclear. But the thing that kind of bothers me the most, and I will probably always say this every episode, is just those horrific headlines. And the one thing that I wish that we could change in our culture when it comes to sexism is just deciding that when a woman is successful, she needs to look and be a certain way for it to be acceptable. No one's success has to be acceptable to somebody else. I mean, fuck off. Like, she was doing so great. And I think just hearing what even Alessandra Stanley at the New York Times had to say, I mean, that's disappointing. That's an esteemed writer who we've come at a couple times now over the show. And I don't like to see especially women come for that. It's disappointing to me. I just wish that the media had taken a little bit of a different tact with this instead of it being a very funny and amusing thing that, oh, she's failing and oh, ha ha ha, she's doing so well in jail now and oh, ha ha ha, I'm taken off the board now and everything's going to take a dip. But the beautiful thing is she did have such a great redemption arc. So it was a great fuck you to everybody in the end.
I agree with everything you just said. To add one more new thing, had I been the producers of the Today Show, why the hell was Matt Lauer interviewing her? They do have women anchors. Like,
they do.
Honestly, having another powerful woman speak to her, I think would have been really compelling. And the fact that they had Matt Lauer do it just speaks to the fact that the media was in on this. They wanted men to take her to task and they wanted men to take her down because that's essentially what he does when you watch that gross interview. He doesn't really listen to her. He's not sympathetic. He doesn't really try to connect with her. He's incredibly smarmy and judgmental and condescending.
Always
he brings
was.
he brings that patriarchal energy. Like, he is here as a representative of the patriarchy to, put this woman in her place. And that's just emblematic of, I think, so much of the media coverage. Yeah. Also, one other thing, if I'd been the producers of the Martha Stewart TV movie, I would have tried to pitch it to HBO to give her, like, the Madoff treatment. I think she deserved a prestige picture. I think Martha deserves that.
Still does, yeah.
She still does.
I'd like to see it.
So to wrap up this episode, Martha is a fascinating case study in intersectionality. The privilege of being a beautiful, well-connected white woman helped get her a book deal. The former model had the look of the perfect all-American housewife. While Martha is undeniably savvy and talented, her beauty and whiteness explained why she became the icon of American domesticity instead of any number of talented homemakers who just didn't look the part. However, Martha is also an example of how patriarchy checks the power of powerful women and how the world delights in taking them down, even when it's not clear they've done much wrong. Martha's story was undeniably shaped both by her many advantages in life and by the sexism that still plagues even the world's most influential women. It's a cautionary tale for any woman who thinks she can win a game where the rules were made by men.
Oof, amen. Now, as always, we hope you'll be back next week as we tackle the very, very, very steep fall of Mel Gibson. Now, if you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at _Sadaf Asan. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at Sarah Sahagian. And if you liked this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. Thanks for listening.